Thank you very much, Federico, Lucas, and Andy for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I will start telling you by heart because my presentation won't appear on the screen. Since this is a central banker conference, I thought it was appropriate to start by quoting a central banker, and I took Paul Volcker's quote from 2009, where he said the most significant financial innovation of the past 20 years was the ATM. He said that in 2009, criticizing the credit default swaps that ended up in Lehman's collapse. Now, if you look at the evolution of means of payment until 2009, there hadn't been much. We saw ATMs, credit cards were prior to that, the debit card, but there wasn't so much change with the ATMs or payment means until that moment. And what's critical in 2009 was that in 2007, iPhone was invented. Android, the operating system, was created in 2008. And from then on, means of payment could have a greater reach for people away from a computer. So what I would like to do today is two things. First, what MercadoPago is and how it works. And then I will tell you about mobile payments, types of mobile payments, and the evolution that we see throughout time. Although Lorenza has already covered Bitcoins, which is another important topic. MercadoPago was born in 2003 as a way to provide a solution for electronic commerce, for e-commerce. These were purchasers and sellers who wanted to operate online. Small operators who wanted to sell online did not get credit cards, and they couldn't receive payments in cash. And the electronic e-commerce was cash on delivery or else bank transfers. Each had their problems. Cash on delivery, oftentimes the purchaser was not there when the delivery was made, and so many packages were returned. And bank transfers, for the ones sending the transfer, they feared doing that, so they wouldn't do that, and sometimes they wouldn't get the product, and they had to revert that transfer they had made. So we connected many means of payment in Latin America, and we were the ones to receive payment. And once the purchaser received the item, we would give the money to the salesperson. That was MercadoPago. We processed 82 million transactions in Latin America last year for $5 billion. We started in Argentina. We went to Brazil and Mexico in 2004, then to Colombia and Venezuela, then to Chile, and we have just launched in Peru. In general, we connect many salespeople with a low volume of sales with a large number of buyers. In December last year, we made payments for 4 million buyers, and we paid 430,000 sellers. Now, when I say what MercadoPago is, they usually ask me, but what is it that you do? What is it that you add on what is the banking system or the credit card system? Americans talk about payment stack. It's the ideal word. It's a full solution for e-commerce. These are the various stacks. The first one is connectivity. We are connected with 68 means of payment in Latin America, all international credit cards, most domestic cards, alternative payment means, since a large proportion of the population do not have a bank account, and we need to offer solutions for purchasers to be able to pay cash, such as Boleto Bancario in Brazil or Pago Fácil in Argentina and OXXO in Mexico. Second layer is the checkout process. How do we optimize that process? It's just a couple of screens on the internet or on a phone. So the conversion ratio, that is to say the percentage of those starting a payment process to actually complete it, that ratio is critical in internet, in electronic payments. retailers are dying for this figure because this implies 10 or 20% more sales. And this, which started being something that was only done over the internet, has changed. And nowadays, all large stores want to customize payments. So instead of sending the customer to MercadoPago to complete their payment in our site, they use APIs or SDKs, that is code of hours that they can include in their applications and have a customized checkout process, and they can do it on their side. Then there are financing issues, especially in Brazil. In Brazil, when a retail sales installments, they can use Parcelado Logista, which is a system allowing installment payments. So what we can do is work with large banks, Bradesco, Itaú, and Banco de Brasil, to discount these documents at a very competitive rate, 1 or 2%, 1 or 2 points over the reference rate in order, or the benchmark rate, in order to offer cheap financing. The next layer is fraud prevention. This is one of the most complex things that we do in MercadoPago and Mercado Libre. We have a large team they are technology people who build neural networks. They look above 4,000 variables in each transaction, and in milliseconds, they will decide whether it's a transaction we want to process, we want to reject, or we want an analyst to have a look at it manually. This is very important. Fraud in e-commerce is very high in the world. Fraud is close to 1% in the world, 1.5% in Latin America. With that, we could survive. So we need a fraction of those figures, and it's important to have a lot of technology or a lot of people or both. Then customer service and clearance. Clearing, that is easier. E-commerce has been growing, but it only represents 4% of retail transactions in the U.S. 20% in Korea. It's growing, but it's still in Latin America, sorry. What happened after the launching of Android and iOS is that there are more cell phones than bank accounts in Latin America and in most of the world. As we saw, the use of banking services varies in Latin America, but it's approximately 50%. In some countries, it's close to 70%, in others closer to 30%. But if we look at the penetration of mobile phones, it's almost 90% of the population that have access to a mobile phone. Most of you pay to people, make payments to people who don't have a bank account, but I'm certain that you don't pay to people who don't have a cell phone. We talk a lot about mobile payments. What I wanted to do was to categorize them. What are the types of mobile payments that we know? Let's start by a definition of mobile payment, which is a payment where the payer or the recipient is using a cell phone or a mobile phone to start or process the payment. We can see mobile payments in 4 different environments. First, e-commerce. These are not transactions in addition to the previous ones. It's the same ones, but electronic commerce is migrating from computers to cell phones, especially in Latin America. Perhaps Mexico is the country that is the leader here, where many people are having their first internet connection through a mobile phone. There is the need to cover payments in 2 different environments here. One is mobile web, which is when I'm using the browser of the telephone and I want to pay. I'm having a look at Groupon and I want to make a payment, for instance. I wrote examples to the right of international examples of those who started providing this solution. The typical case is PayPal, that allowed mobile SDKs so that the payment could be done if they had, for instance, a credit card already recorded in their and cell phones, especially when you have to enter so many figures and numbers and codes, so it's more efficient. The next is, there is a site, if it's a site that I use at all times, I may have the app for that site. For those who create apps, especially those who are not as big or sophisticated, they want to embed a payment solution in their app so that the user will not have to exit the app. For those who travel is Uber. The first day I take a photograph of the card, then I download the car and I don't even know what I paid. Those who supported facilitating this integration were Stripe and Braintree, that was later purchased by PayPal, and they both enable anybody willing to have an application to have the payment area solved by just entering a piece of code. That is one problem less that you may have when using these applications. Then there are also applications for physical commerce. It may vary on who starts a payment. On the side of sellers, what Stripe invented a few years ago was to take the PayPal model to the retail store with an MPOS, that is a credit card reader. It was initially a cost issue, and for Latin America, costs are very relevant. A POS in Latin America used to be rented, and the cost was $20 to $30 per month. For a big retail, that's irrelevant, but for a small one, it's very relevant. So we started to sell the POS in Brazil 1 year ago. We have tens of thousands of devices, and we see that the average transactions of an MPOS are $400. So if a small store had to pay $20 over $400, that's 5% cost plus the transaction cost, and that wouldn't be a good idea for them. So what Square did was the long part of the curve having access to pay with credit card. And then there are three solutions that relate to the mobile wallet. That is an application that you download in your mobile phone. It may be PenPal or MercadoPagos, where you can have a transaction in different ways. I've got three cases for use. First, in a physical store, I am in a taxi. They don't have an MPOS, but they have a QR code, and I can read that code, identify who I should send the money. Or at a coffee store. Or else, if it is not a QR code, it may be NFC technology, getting the device close to the reader and sending the information that way. The best known is Apple Pay. Apple Pay is the most frequently used case. The most used wallet is the one in Starbucks, where people go very often. They download the Starbucks wallet, and this enables them not to take the card out, but they can just pre-order and request their drinks in advance from their cell phones. So in addition to not having to use the card, they also win some time. Then there is a lot of payments between individuals that are growing much, and this changes much. What happens in Africa is different from what happens in the U.S. or in Asia. In the U.S., they have Venmo, which appeared in a university in the U.S., and what it enables you to do is to get funding through bank funding for the mobile phones, and kids can start sending money to one another because they owed money for lunch, and they are getting money together to buy a birthday gift. So that is Venmo. For large transactions, it's free. And it was very useful in Africa. Africa is an environment where many people are not using banking services, so it replaced bank accounts, but the cost is the entry cost of money in the system. It's cash. So that person has to be paid somehow. And the last one is utility payments. I may have money in my cell phone, and I can read a bill with a QR code or a barcode and pay for a utility service. It looks very basic, but every time I go past a Pago Fácil and I see a line of people waiting there, I'm surprised at the number of people who are not using this. What are we doing? As I told you, we have launched most of it. For e-commerce, we have solutions in websites or apps. It's live throughout Latin America. In some cases, we have very successful applications in Latin America. For instance, in Brazil, Bilheteria Digital is a company selling bus tickets, long-distance bus tickets, that uses our app to close the cycle. Or Groupon in Argentina using our code for mobile web payments. Physical retail or commerce, we started in Brazil 1 year ago. We have pilot tests in Mexico and Argentina. We believe there is a big opportunity there. If we see the proportion of POSs every 100,000 people in Latin America, and if we compare that with developed countries, it's a fraction. According to the country, it's 1/3 to 1/6. So there is much opportunity for more POSs in the streets. And then mobile wallets of all sorts. We have several million downloads. We still need to offer utility service payment, but peer-to-peer can be done with our application. Something that we added to this new flow in MercadoPago is, although we had many means of payment, we lacked a couple of things. To facilitate funding and fund withdrawal, we started by Mexico, launching a prepaid card. As Lorenza was saying, in Mexico, there are different levels of bank accounts. These are level 2. We're associated to a bank in Mexico. What is good about it is somebody who's not using banking services will have a card without going to a bank branch, and they can operate with up to $800 a month. It is an easy way to provide banking services to a person, and it's an easy way to reach somebody who wants to receive payments but does not have a bank account. Now they do not need to go to a bank or have a bank account. Another important funding point is the following. There are 2 forms of banking funding, push and pull. Pull is more frequent in Latin America. The user goes into their home banking site and they will push money in the platform. There is an advantage there. The user knows what is being done and there is much security, and there is a huge disadvantage, something very burdensome. I'm sure you all do this, but for an ordinary user who is in the middle of a transaction, it is burdensome. The other is pull. Somebody, as the payments directive in Europe, allowing to a third party, allowing me to take money from a bank account as I do from a credit card. The merchant is taking the risk, but I can take money that way and I can fund a transaction in a much easier way for the user without interrupting the flow. With all that, we believe that the potential is huge, and a typical use case that we see is to be able to reach to a hot dog shop in the corner with a prepaid card and an mPOS, and the person, without having to go to a bank, can receive payments with their card and then withdraw the funds with their prepaid card and then continue electronically. Thank you very much.